Right, so episode 1 of a little mini-series I'm doing called Watches in Movies. I think we're going to start with an easy one. Let's look at Die Hard. Welcome back to the Timeless Watch channel, guys. Over the coming weeks, between various different episodes, I'm going to take a look at when they use watches on the silver screen in Hollywood. Many times, screenwriters and authors actually work a watch into the story of the movie. In some cases, it actually plays a key role in the narrative, and I find that kind of fun and fascinating. So we're going to start off with a very easy one, a film you've all seen. The legendary Christmas movie, actually, Die Hard. Now this one's a little peculiar because it doesn't really feature a watch up close very much. Instead, the watch is more of a symbolic thing in the story. But as it happens, watches were supposed to play a larger role in the original story. When the author Stephen de Souza revealed that extra part to the plot that was never used, it actually cleared up a plot hole that many Die Hard fans were complaining about over the years. So you all know the story here. John McClane, our main man, played by Bruce Willis, is a New York cop who flies into Los Angeles on Christmas Eve to visit his wife and kids, who have moved out to Los Angeles many months previous as a career move on the part of Holly McClane, John's wife.
You don't like flying, do you?
Now immediately we're set up with a certain level of tension because John is out of his element. He's out of New York, he's in LA, it's all a little unusual to him.
California.
And he's immediately met with limousine service. In that moment, we're shown that John is a regular blue-collar guy and doesn't really care for the luxury corporate world. Instead of riding in the back of the limousine, he rides up front with the driver and lights himself a cigarette. So immediately we get an idea. John really doesn't want to play along with this whole corporate luxury thing at all. His wife, Holly McClane, who he's come to visit, is moving up in the firm she works for, the Nakatomi Corporation, and she's currently at a Christmas party at their brand new building, Nakatomi Plaza, a name we're all very familiar with. When John arrives, instead of finding his wife's name under Holly McClane on the index screen, he realizes that she's actually not using her married name at all. She's using her maiden name, Gennaro. This kind of rubs John the wrong way because he is already feeling like she's moved to a place that's very kind of foreign and different for him, and he's feeling discarded from her new life, and this is an extra brick in that wall, if you will. When he arrives up to the party, he of course is dressed very plain, a regular blue-collar working class guy surrounded by $1,000 suits everywhere. One of those suits is a colleague of John's wife by the name of Ellis. He's a very stereotypical Wall Street type who's snorting cocaine and very impressed by wealth and power and privilege. In a feeble attempt to impress John, he mentions the watch they had recently gifted to his wife for her accomplishments at the firm.
Show him the watch.
Later.
Knowing that our hero is not impressed by such things, Holly tries to divert a bit and change the subject. And then, of course, we get the famous, smug, conceited line from Ellis that we all know so well.
Token of appreciation for all our hard work. It's a Rolex.
Now, there is no way that that line didn't affect the sales in a positive way for Rolex in America and probably in the rest of the world at the time, even though Rolex was already a very famous brand and clearly represents something that very expensive, very luxury. But actually the watch is being framed in a kind of a non-complimentary fashion. It represents everything about Holly's new life that's all about money and corporate power and so on. She's kind of left behind John, who represents kind of family values. He's not interested in her her new firm. He's more interested right now why she's not actually using her maiden name, and he's got a bone to pick with her over that. So already the watch is a sort of a symbol or an emblem that she has taken on. You could say that she shed the name McLean and put on the watch instead, sort of thing. Now, as we all well know, the party comes to a grinding halt and the Nakatomi Plaza is taken over very abruptly by a bunch of German terrorists led by none other than Mr. Hans Gruber, our main villain, played brilliantly by Alan Rickman. And though it seems at first that Gruber's message may be a moral one, anti-corporate one, anti-greed.
Due to the Nakatomi Corporation's legacy of greed around the globe, they are about to be taught a lesson in the real use of power.
It actually turns out that Hans is after the same thing everyone else in that building is after, other than our hero, and that is money and power.
You want money? What kind of terrorists are you?
So again, we're reminded that everything in this building is to do with getting ahead in the corporate world, wealth, privilege, power, and luxury, the Rolex watch included. The only person exempt from this, of course, is Mr. John McClane, who's more concerned with family values, etc. And over the next 90 minutes of the movie, he has to rely on his blue-collar instincts, his prowess as a hardened New York cop with problems, and use whatever he can find to save the day. So during the movie, we get more and more the feeling that what we're surrounded by are a lot of people who don't really understand other people as well as John does. For example, Ellis tries to negotiate with Hans, and that completely backfires. Ellis assumes that Hans is a greedy person, just like Ellis is.
Business is business. You use a gun, I use a fountain pen. What's the difference?
They try to score a deal based on a little bit of greed and deception, which seems to be their common language. And as we all know, that plan goes terribly wrong. Whereas in the meantime, John makes friends with his other cop buddy over the walkie-talkie, and they have a kind of a mutual instinct between them. They have a lot in common. They're regular cops and they're both family men.
They're for my wife. Yeah. She's pregnant. Yeah.
So once again, we're reminded of those good, salt of the earth, blue collar family values that both our hero and the LAPD sergeant share versus the hollow, empty corporate wealth luxury kind of world that all the Nakatomi people live in, as do Hans and his cronies.
When Alexander saw the breadth of his domain, he wept, for there were no more worlds to conquer.
Now, as it happens, there was another very famous brand that was supposed to feature as our hero begins to kill all the terrorists slowly, one by one. He goes through all their personal items like their wallet and finds cigarettes and so on.
These are very bad for you.
During those scenes, he was originally supposed to notice that they were all wearing the same brand of watch, a Tag Heuer. On the walkie-talkie to his new friend Al down below, when he's talking about them being European terrorists, he was supposed to have been indicated that by the brand of cigarettes that they were smoking and the brand of watch that they were wearing.
These guys are mostly European, judging by their clothing labels, and
that was eventually removed, and they only left in the part where he mentions
cigarettes.
Now, the reason this was in the original screenplay was that it was supposed to set us up for a scene later where Hans Gruber and our hero John McClane actually cross paths.
Hi there.
In that scene, Alan Rickman brilliantly acts as Hans Gruber, pretending to be a hostage.
I managed to get out of there, well, I was just trying to get up on the roof.
And as far as we can see, our hero actually believes him, even lights him a cigarette and offers him his pistol. But moments later, when Hans tries to shoot him, we realize he never believed him at all.
Oops. No bullets. Stupid Hans.
Now that is the plot hole that the die-hard fans have been complaining about for years now. Stephen DeSouza, the original writer, reveals the whole story about the Tag Heuer thing, about everybody wearing the same watches, and our hero was supposed to have noticed the watch on Hans's wrist when he was offering him a cigarette. That was supposed to be the moment where you realize that John is super observant and he's going to notice Tag Heuer written on the watch. I don't know why it got cut out of the story in the end. Maybe they thought it was a little far-fetched. But of course, knowing that information, that explains why John would have known that Hans was bluffing, pretending to be a hostage. And now I can't help but notice Alan Rickman seems to be deliberately hiding his wristwatch on his left arm behind his back. Perhaps they filmed it, perhaps those parts were actually in the original movie, but they wound up on the cutting room floor later. Anyway, long story short, Hans eventually breaks open the vault and sees the $640 million in bonds that he's been after the whole time. But around that moment, of course, John catches up with him and shoots him. Hans falls through the window and we see him grab onto John's wife, Holly. Hans is hanging on for dear life onto Holly's wrist, but it's actually not her wrist or her hand that's keeping his grip. It's actually none other than the Rolex watch she was given. In a desperate struggle, Holly tries to shake him loose. Our hero has to actually undo the bracelet of the beautiful Rolex in order to release her from Hans's grip. And symbolically, it releases her from the grip of that entire new world that she has. Along with the Rolex watch, Hans falls to his death. So John McClane came and saved her from the perils of the greedy corporate world and showed her what real values are and relieved her of this symbol that she had been wearing on her wrist also.
How is my wife Holly? Holly Gennaro.
Holly McClane.
So there it is. The Rolex watch, in a way, is kind of shown in a bad light. I don't know if Rolex noticed that or cared about that, or even if it occurred to them at all. But actually what their watch is representing in this film is everything that's bad about the greedy corporate luxury world from which we should be saved by the blue-collar family man. One thing you might notice in this film also is that Bruce Willis is wearing his watch downwards. So in other words, the head of the watch is on the underside of his wrist facing down. That's something you'll notice in a lot of other films that I mentioned in this series about watches and movies. Quite often, protagonists, when they have a watch on, they wear it down. It's a very curious little detail I keep noticing. I wonder if anybody out there can throw some light on why that might be. So there it is, guys. Just a fun little thing. Maybe something you hadn't noticed about that movie. The next one coming up will be a movie called The Edge with Alec Baldwin and Sir Anthony Hopkins. Excellent film, and watches play a very big role, a key role in the narrative of the movie, so look out for that. Thanks again for watching the Timeless Watch channel. I will see you in the next one.